Darius had spent his entire adult life working toward one goal: security. Not just financial, but the kind of peace that came with it, the quiet mornings, the control over your own surroundings, the soft rhythm of a calm, suburban life. So when he finally closed on his dream home in a polished, HOA-managed neighborhood in the heart of the city's northern quarter, it felt like arriving at the destination he'd been walking toward for years. His house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, with manicured lawns and thick green hedges separating him from his neighbors. It was a place where the garbage bins were lined up evenly, holiday decorations never overstayed their welcome, and neighbors waved politely without prying too much. Just how he liked it. At 35, Darius was a systems analyst for a major tech firm, working remotely most days and running occasional freelance contracts on the side. The work was quiet, cerebral, and it paid well, enough for his down payment, his Audi, and the smart home upgrades he'd installed the first month he moved in. He was a man who liked control and efficiency, and nothing pleased him more than a perfectly functioning environment, which is why the slow Wi-Fi began to gnaw at him more than he expected. At first, he blamed it on the devices. Between his home office, security system, smart TV, phone, and the occasional guest on the network, it made sense. Bandwidth hiccups happened. But after 2 weeks of laggy video calls, sluggish uploads, and interrupted streaming, he decided to take a deeper look. Tech was his bread and butter, after all. If something was wrong, he'd find it. He logged into the admin panel of his router late one Thursday night, a mug of green tea in hand, and noticed it almost instantly. An unfamiliar device logged in, hidden among his known systems. It wasn't one of his. Not even close. The MAC address was unrecognized, the device name blank, and the signal was strong, meaning it was close. Very close. With a slow, deliberate breath, he changed the password. Kicked every device off the network. Reconnected only his own. He tightened the firewall, updated the firmware, and smiled to himself. Problem solved. Or so he thought. The next morning, as he sat on his porch sipping coffee and scrolling the news, the tranquility shattered. His neighbor, Karen Whitmore, stormed across the street and onto his property without so much as a knock. She was clutching a phone, dressed in a blouse too clean for someone not headed to work, and radiating entitlement from every pore. Darius had seen her around, mostly from afar. She kept her lawn pristine, always waved at certain neighbors, and maintained the kind of forced friendliness that disappeared the moment you turned your back. She had that brittle smile and disapproving gaze, the kind that judged your front yard decor and probably wrote anonymous HOA complaints about the trash bins not being out by 6 a.m. on collection day. "Did you change your Wi-Fi password?" she barked. Darius blinked at her. "Morning to you too. Don't play games. Did you change it?" He placed his mug down and leaned against the porch post. "Yeah. Why?" Karen's face darkened. "Because my internet stopped working. I've been using that connection for months, and now I can't do anything." For a beat, he stared at her, unsure if he'd misheard. But no, she'd said it plainly. No shame, no hesitation. "You've been using my Wi-Fi?" he said slowly. She scoffed. "It's just the internet. You people always make a big deal out of nothing. It's not like it costs you extra." His jaw clenched. "You people?" He caught the implication, but swallowed it down. No need to give her fuel. "It's my network," he said evenly. "I pay for it. You don't have a right to it." "Oh, I see how it is," she spat. "You think you can move in here and start playing games with the people who built this community. You don't belong here. You think you can just cut off people without consequences?" Before he could answer, she whipped out her phone. "I'm calling the police." "You're calling the cops? On me?" he asked, more stunned than angry. She turned away, pacing his front walk. "There's a suspicious man in the neighborhood," she said into the phone, feigning panic. "He's trying to hack into my devices. I feel threatened. Darius watched her in disbelief. She thought she could weaponize the system like a remote control. Press a button, and someone would come running to put him in his place. But what she didn't know was that she had just declared war on the wrong man. He went back inside, calm but focused, and opened his router's connection logs. The trail was long, but thorough. She'd been using his network regularly, streaming, browsing, downloading, but also much more. As he scrolled through deeper logs, the blood drained from his face. There were visits to online forums littered with racist content, conspiracy theory hubs, hate speech, even extremist organizing platforms. Anonymous posts traced to her device. Same MAC address, same timestamp, filled with venom and coded threats. It was bad. But it got worse. Hidden among the logs were several encrypted transactions routed through shady websites. VPN trails poorly masked. Cookie traces not cleared. She had been selling stolen merchandise through third-party apps, possibly even operating identity fraud scams using stolen credit card data. Then came the final horror. A ping to a site flagged for illegal content. Explicit. Trafficking. Darius sat back, heart pounding. This wasn't about stolen Wi-Fi anymore. He transferred the data to a USB drive. Screenshotted every relevant file. Dated it, backed it up, encrypted a second copy on a cloud account. By the time the sirens echoed down the block, he was ready. The patrol car pulled up slowly. 2 officers stepped out. Officer Jordan, tall and composed, black, with a slow and calculating gaze. His partner, Officer Miller, shorter, stockier, white, and visibly unimpressed by the woman who greeted them with frantic hand gestures. "She's been stealing my Wi-Fi," Darius explained simply when asked. Karen, of course, was mid-performance. "He's hacking everyone. He's threatening me. He's dangerous," Miller snorted. "Wait, you called us because he changed his password?" Karen spun on him, lips curled. "It's more than that." Jordan remained calm, notebook in hand. "Do you have any proof he's been hacking into your devices?" Karen flinched. "Well, no, but and you?" He turned to Darius. "Can you prove she used your network?" Darius nodded. "Yes. Would you like to come inside?" Karen's confidence cracked as they stepped inside. She lingered at the doorway, as if realizing too late that her plan had twisted against her. Darius showed them everything. The logs, the screenshots, the timestamps, the MAC addresses. The forums. The transaction trail. The flag site access. Officer Miller's face shifted. "Jesus!" Karen stood frozen. "He's making this up! He's framing me!" "Your IP address," Darius said quietly. "Remember whose Wi-Fi you used." Officer Jordan folded his arms. "You piggybacked on someone else's network, and now you're saying they somehow faked all this under your name?" Karen spluttered. Then she lunged. Her manicured hand swiped for Darius's face, shrieking incoherently. Officer Miller caught her wrist mid-swing, locking her arm behind her back as she kicked and screamed. "I'm the victim. You don't understand. You're under arrest," Officer Jordan said, snapping the cuffs on. "Assault. Cybercrime. Fraud. Possibly more." She screamed louder, but it wasn't over. Before she could be led outside, Karen did the unthinkable. She spat, directly in Officer Jordan's face. The room went still. Jordan didn't flinch. He wiped his cheek slowly, eyes burning with disgust, and said nothing as he clicked the second cuff in place. Miller, meanwhile, looked like he was ready to lose control. "You just made the worst day of your life even worse," he muttered. Outside, neighbors had gathered. Phones recording. Gasps and murmurs followed her shrieks as they dragged her to the patrol car. "He's the criminal! Not me!" she wailed. Nobody believed her. Not anymore. The story exploded within hours. Local news, online blogs, national headlines. Viral footage. Racist woman arrested after attacking black neighbor over Wi-Fi. Cybercrime evidence found. Every outlet picked it up. The arrest. The spit. The meltdown. It was all there, crystal clear, in HD, recorded by a dozen phones. Karen Whitmore had gone from petty tyrant to public disgrace in less than 24 hours. Her HOA held an emergency vote. She was banned. Her house, a once prized asset, was consumed by legal fees and lawsuits. Foreclosure followed. Her name became internet slang. And Darius? He got his piece. And no more stolen bandwidth. No more surprise guests. No more screams on his porch. Just coffee. A strong connection. And just as he smiled when a friend texted, "Bro, you're a legend." She thought she was untouchable, he whispered, watching the sunset. Guess she found out otherwise. The fallout was faster than anyone expected. By the time the sun rose the next day, Karen Whitmore's name was trending on multiple platforms. Clips of her arrest were spliced together, memed, reshared with hashtags like #Wi-Fi Karen and #Karen Exposed, and dissected on commentary channels. TikTok creators mimicked her now infamous scream. Reddit threads filled with screenshots from Darius's router logs. Journalists reached out for interviews. News vans lined the entrance to the neighborhood by that evening. But Darius wasn't celebrating. Not yet. His name wasn't public, he hadn't posted the footage, and the police had respected his right to privacy. But the internet had a way of uncovering people. His inbox was already swelling with media requests, old acquaintances wanting updates, distant family members asking if the viral story was really him. He ignored them. The situation hadn't just gone viral, it had escalated into a legal wildfire. The FBI had gotten involved due to the nature of the data Karen had accessed using his network. There were serious implications: hate crimes, organized fraud, even potential trafficking. Darius had handed over everything to the detectives who arrived at his door the next afternoon, and they made it clear this wasn't going away anytime soon. And yet, amid all the chaos, Darius remained calm. He had done nothing wrong. He wasn't afraid. What he felt instead was clarity, sharp, steady, and long overdue. Because Karen Whitmore wasn't just a neighborhood nuisance. She was a product of something much larger. Something uglier. And she wasn't the only one. In the days that followed, as law enforcement combed through Karen's activity, a larger web of enablers and accomplices began to surface. Fake email addresses, dummy bank accounts, redirected shipping addresses, many of which were traced back to a business registered under her husband's name. His name hadn't come up publicly before now. He traveled often, barely home, and rarely seen, but his digital fingerprints were all over the fraudulent transactions Karen had processed. Darius watched with muted interest as federal agents showed up at the Whitmore residence 2 days later, boxes in hand, hauling out computers, tablets, storage drives. Karen's face was nowhere to be seen. She had been denied bail. Neighbors started speaking up. Whispers turned to open conversation. One woman, an elderly widow who lived 2 houses down, confessed quietly to Darius over coffee that Karen had been monitoring, who came to her house. "She once told me I should stop letting those delivery people come up the driveway," the woman said, voice shaking. "I didn't know how bad it was." Another neighbor admitted Karen had pressured them into filing noise complaints against Darius for no reason. "She said if we didn't, she'd start digging into our property lines," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. "I'm sorry, man." Darius didn't respond with anger. Just a nod. Let them sit with the guilt. His focus had shifted. With Karen out of the picture, the neighborhood began to breathe differently. Subtle, but noticeable. People walked a little slower past his house. Some waved. One day, a young couple brought over homemade cookies as a peace offering, awkward and sincere. Darius didn't need their apologies. He didn't need their pity either, but he accepted the cookies. The HOA, desperate to do damage control, launched a full internal investigation. Karen had held an unofficial position of influence, never elected, but always hovering around board decisions, always finding a way to make her voice louder than it should have been. They couldn't scrub her fingerprints off the community entirely, but they could erase what was left. They purged old minutes, flagged suspicious votes, and formally banned her from future neighborhood access. And still, the story spread. By the end of the month, a major podcast had done a full episode on the case. They disguised names, blurred addresses, but the message was clear. Karen had weaponized her race, her privilege, and the legal system to shield her crimes and persecute an innocent black man. She had failed. And now she was the blueprint for what justice looked like when the truth came to light. Darius listened to the episode once, late at night. Alone. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just sat there, the hum of his fan the only sound in the room, letting it sink in. Because it wasn't just about Karen anymore. It was about every person who had ever been underestimated. Every neighbor who had been watched more closely, who had been told to tone it down, or keep it quiet, or remember where they live. He thought about his father, a man who had worked factory jobs for 30 years just to afford a modest 2-bedroom home in a working-class neighborhood, who used to say, "We don't get to make mistakes, son. One mistake and it's all gone." Darius had heard that sentence 1,000 times growing up. It echoed in his mind now, like a warning and a victory cry all at once, because he hadn't made a mistake. Karen had, and this time, she had paid the price. The trial was set for early spring. Karen faced charges for cybercrime, identity theft, harassment, and assaulting a police officer. Her husband, who had tried to quietly liquidate one of their accounts, was indicted for wire fraud. Their assets were frozen. Their house was seized. The woman who had once marched across his lawn demanding free Wi-Fi was now reduced to a booking photo and a case file. And Darius? He got offers, book deals, media appearances, speaking engagements. Some wanted him to tell his story on morning talk shows. One editor even pitched a social justice meets cybersecurity memoir. He turned them all down, not because he didn't have something to say, but because he knew this moment wasn't his alone. He hadn't asked for fame. He just wanted to sit on his porch with his coffee and feel safe. So that's what he did. Day by day, the world spun on. The headlines moved on. The memes faded. But inside that quiet suburban cul-de-sac, something had changed. The house across the street stayed empty. The HOA board added new bylaws about tech privacy and racial harassment. More neighbors started checking in. A few even asked Darius for tech help, awkward, sheepish, and honest. He helped them, not because they deserved it, but because he did. Spring bloomed. The grass grew greener. The Wi-Fi stayed fast. And for the first time in a long time, Darius breathed easy. He hadn't just survived Karen Whitmore. He had outlived her legend. And he would never have to share his network again. By the time Karen's arraignment date arrived, the neighborhood had all but turned its back on her. The once pristine home she had obsessed over now sat hollow, its blinds drawn, its yard untrimmed, and its mailbox crammed with unopened notices. A foreclosure sign appeared on the lawn, angled awkwardly toward the street, like a final gasp of control slipping from her hands. Darius passed it each morning on his jog, and each time he looked at it, he didn't feel victory, just confirmation. She had built her life on fear and illusion, and both had collapsed under the weight of facts. The courtroom was packed the day of her first hearing, not just with reporters and legal aides, but neighbors too, curious, angry, some still shocked, others hoping to see proof that the system could hold someone like her accountable. Karen walked in wearing a beige suit that looked 2 sizes too big. Her hair, once rigid and perfectly curled, was now limp and flattened. Her eyes, which had once burned with righteous anger, darted nervously between reporters and unfamiliar faces. She looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. She didn't acknowledge Darius, She couldn't. He sat quietly near the back, expression neutral, dressed in a clean navy shirt and black slacks. His arms were folded, his posture straight. Not proud. Not smug. Just ready. Her lawyer tried everything, claimed she'd had a mental breakdown, tried to cast doubt on the digital evidence, suggested someone else had accessed the illegal websites. But it didn't matter. The paper trail was too clean. The data Darius had collected was airtight. He hadn't just taken screenshots, he had mirrored the logs, timestamped and hash verified the files, something any IT forensics expert could verify. The judge listened. The prosecution presented their findings clearly and methodically. The defense sputtered. Karen's husband never appeared in court. He had already fled the state, and a federal warrant had been issued. According to the prosecutor, they had laundered tens of thousands of dollars through fraudulent product listings, siphoning money through returns that never existed. Darius wasn't the only victim. He was just the only one who had noticed. And then came the moment no one had expected, the unsealing of the private messages. The prosecutor revealed dozens of screenshots, forum posts, emails, even direct messages that Karen had sent using her anonymous profiles. The language was violent, hateful, and specific. In one thread, she bragged about using neighborhood leverage to keep people in their place. In another, she detailed how easy it was to call the cops on someone who fits the description. The courtroom fell silent. One neighbor stood up and walked out, visibly shaken. Karen sat motionless as the judge denied her bail extension. Her trial would move forward. Her lawyer quietly requested a psychiatric evaluation. Darius didn't clap. He didn't cheer. He simply stood, adjusted his watch, and walked out into the afternoon. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. The weeks that followed were quieter, but not without change. The HOE hired a new compliance director, this time a woman of color, who immediately began rewriting neighborhood policy. She held a town hall meeting on inclusion and privacy, and though some residents didn't show, the ones who did listened closely. For the first time since moving in, Darius felt like his presence wasn't being tolerated, it was being respected. He started hosting small gatherings, cookouts, coffee mornings, tech workshops for older neighbors. Nothing big. Nothing flashy. Just open doors and open conversation. Word spread. People came. They asked questions. They learned about router security and password safety. They brought cookies and questions. Slowly, something shifted. One Saturday, a kid from down the block shyly asked if Darius could help fix his Xbox. Darius knelt, smiled, and said, "Only if you promise not to steal my Wi-Fi." The boy laughed. So did his parents. Healing had begun. The trial itself stretched over 6 weeks. Karen pled not guilty on all counts, despite overwhelming evidence. Her attorney floated the idea that Darius had fabricated logs and manipulated data, a suggestion that was shredded under expert testimony. The IT forensics witness dismantled every claim, walking the jury through Darius's evidence step by step. Darius himself was called to the stand. He spoke clearly, calmly, and without emotion. He explained what he had found, how he had found it, and why he had decided not to panic. His testimony didn't paint him as a hero. It painted him as someone who simply refused to be bullied, and that, the jury respected. In the end, the verdict came swift and sharp, guilty on all counts. The judge didn't mince words. "You used your access to exploit your neighbors, your community, and this man's trust. You fabricated danger to shield your own crimes, and you relied on bias to cover your tracks. This court sees through it." Karen was sentenced to 15 years without parole. Her husband was arrested 2 months later in Nevada, living under a fake identity. He faced federal charges and received 20 years. Justice, finally, had a long memory. But life, as it does, moved forward. The neighborhood changed. The home Karen once obsessed over was bought by a young interracial couple, with 2 adopted kids and a golden retriever. They knocked down her manicured hedges and put in a porch swing. Darius walked past their home every morning. Sometimes he waved. Sometimes he was invited in for lemonade. He accepted, because healing wasn't just about winning, it was about what came next. And for the first time in his adult life, Darius didn't feel like he had to explain himself. Not to Karen. Not to anyone. He sat on his porch one evening as the sky melted into amber and dusk. The air was quiet. A breeze moved through the trees like a sigh of relief. His phone buzzed. Another message from a friend. "Man, you should write a book about all this." Maybe he would. But for now, he took another sip of coffee, looked out across his peaceful street, and smiled. The Wi-Fi was fast. The air was clean. And the darkness was finally behind him.